Welcome back to the 365 Driven podcast. Today we have a interesting topic that is very important, especially for you business owners that do not have your own marketing team yet, and you have to be the marketing and the face and the brand, putting yourself out there to drive leads, to create some profit for your company. Brought an expert in to talk on this subject. His name is Henry Sims, and he's going to give the lowdown on how you can build a stronger personal brand. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Thanks for having me. How's it going, everybody?
So personal branding, this is a topic that you are an expert at, we can get into the story behind that, but what is it that's going to make this conversation different from all the other personal branding conversations that are out there?
Well, I think what's different is my perspective of branding. I came from a background of engineering. I'm a big nerd. So my perspective is not woo-woo and fluff. It's very real of what this asset of brand does for us as business owners. So I'm not going to be talking up in the clouds. I'm going to be talking here on the ground.
All right. Well, we got two engineering nerds on this podcast talking a personal brand now. Awesome. It's gonna be, so that's what makes a difference. You got two technical, analytical guys that are nerds that are talking about building a brand.
Yep.
So, people are going to wonder, where did this all come from? And, full disclosure, this is the first father and son combo that I've ever had on my show. Your father, unfortunately, he passed away a year ago of cancer, and it was a terrible tragedy we lost, but he was one of my earliest guests. He was on episode 170 back in, I looked it up, 2020. And he dropped some bombs like, your dad always did, and good guy. And it comes to find out that you were the one helping in the background, building his entire personal brand, which is amazing to hear that.
Yeah. We had I'm very fortunate that we had that opportunity to work with each other. And sometimes it works. Family business is tough. Sometimes it doesn't. Probably more times it doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were very yin and yang. So even if you guys go back to that episode and watch it, and then you watch this one, you'll see that he's very energetic, very outgoing, very sarcastic. He's an old school London bricklayer. Like, that's what you're going to get from him. But then there's me, which is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, where a little quieter, softer spoken. And, but it worked because we complemented each other. He was out there pushing hard, and then I was behind him, making sure that all of that became repeatable and profitable. So it was a very good relationship that fortunately worked well for both of us.
So give us the backstory on how you got wrangled into doing all that, and the whole blue fishing and all the other stuff that you guys built together. It was amazing to watch, but like, where did that initially start?
Yeah. Well, going way back, I actually didn't want anything to do with business, because when I was a little kid, obviously I was born into an entrepreneurial family. Yeah. So growing up, it was great because you got to see at that point in his career, the success and the level of life you had that you got to enjoy. But then I also started to get just old enough to recognize the roller coaster and how low the lows went, as well as how high the highs went. And when I was just 9 years old, he had bad investors come in and screw over the company and lost everything. And so the house was gone. We had to move, completely started fresh, his whole new business, and regaining it again. And so when I saw that, I was like, why would anyone do this? Why would you not get a good, highly skilled job that pays you nicely each month? And so I just completely turned away from the idea of business. I wanted to go everywhere else. And so I just realized going through school that I loved building RC cars. I loved working on motorcycles, just tinkering away, figuring out how things worked. I was good with math and physics and all of that. So naturally, I went towards engineering. All my counselors were saying that's the way to go. So I went to college for engineering. And after a few years, I realized as much as I liked it, I was missing a creative outlet. So I dropped out against everyone telling me, like, you only got a year left, get the degree. But right. I just thought, why am I going to waste another year and get into more student debt? So I left and started just looking at, well, maybe there's something in this business world that does fit the analytical and the creative components. So I started just going to all these events, started reading books. My dad had friends where they basically let me just sit in on their business meetings every single month and listen to what they were talking about. And I remember one meeting where these people were talking about back in the day, putting a Facebook pixel on your website and how someone could go there. And when they left, you could serve them ads to bring them back. And I perked up. I was like, wait, you can do that? You can just track them onto another platform and send customized messages. And I thought it was so cool. And it was funny because at the time I also thought, I know nothing about coding or building websites. So like, that's a long shot. I'll never be able to do that. And now I click of the fingers and it's done. But that was what opened me up to the world of marketing.
Okay.
And so I dove in and started doing some little projects with my dad because he was wanting to transition away from his previous business, which was the luxury concierge, and go more into this personal branding space. So, we hadn't yet thought about working together. Also, I was only just diving into marketing, but I started just diving into it. And so here and there, I'd do some things for him that I figured out and then started building some skills, and some clients he was working with needed them. And so I kind of became a freelancer for him and clients of his until eventually he was like you've figured out a lot of stuff. He's like, can you help me go all in on the personal brand thing and really step away from the old business into speaking, events, and coaching and all of that kind of info space.
Yeah.
And so we spoke about it for a couple months to make sure we were aligned on where we both wanted to go personally and professionally, and make sure we didn't ruin our relationship. And we were like, yeah, this sounds good. So that's when we decided to really attack it together and build his personal brand. So that's how I found myself going from engineering and finding a creative yet still analytical space where I got both to serve business owners. So that's how I found myself here.
I like the analytical trail that you followed, taking it from school, then listening to hearing data points and pixels. And, it's cool to understand all that kind of stuff. I mean, I came in it through a roundabout way of learning. Really, I wanted to be creative and design web pages, like static stuff, like late 90s. And so I taught myself HTML by reading a book and just practicing. It was really crappy back then. It's easy to do, but websites were really kind of one pagers back then, right?
Yeah.
I taught myself that, and then I realized like there was businesses that wanted web pages because they didn't have web presence. And so I kind of came in through that way and had to understand marketing and graphic design and learning all these different platforms and apps and such. And, so it's kind of cool how we both arrive in a personal branding conversation on a podcast, like, a decade later. But I want to go back into that story because, your dad is well known for building a really strong personal brand because, like you said, he's high energy. He was very outspoken. He would definitely give you his opinion, good and bad. If it hurt your feelings, he didn't care. Like, he was going to tell you. He's very straight, direct. But that's what people expected from him. That's what they loved about him. That's why I enjoyed, hanging out with him at the different events we got to speak at together. And, going back into that now, and I realize that you guys crafted this personal brand over years and repetition and seeing what works and didn't work. Give us an honest assessment. Like, let's say that if your father was a new client today and you're going to do a brand audit, what are the things that you could point out that stood out within his personal brand that you would want to bring more forward and emphasize to an audience?
Yeah, it was good. So at the very beginning, when you first see him, it's very noticeable how forward he is, how sarcastic he is, and that kind of humor. And he isn't afraid to say things. And so that is good because it cuts through the noise and it speaks to a very specific person. And when I was just starting with him, a lot of the skills I was learning was like Facebook ads and some of the content side of things as well, but it was much more technical on ads and trying to get him out there. And as I was creating ads for him and we were pushing out, I was dealing with so many rejections because he'd say something inappropriate or he'd curse on there and we would ban all these ads. And so I was constantly fighting with him to try and figure out how do we kind of tone it down so that we don't lose the ability to advertise and grow our reach. But as I was going to these events with him, and as I was looking at all the conversations online that we were generating, I saw how valuable that was. And, initially I thought if you want to scale up and build audience, you need to appeal to more people. But it was really quite the opposite. And he always described it as not wanting to have fence sitters, where someone's just kind of on the border of whether or not they like you. You want them to know right off the bat and make a decision. And so his humor and the way that he held himself and communicated was one of those components where people either liked or disliked him very quickly. Right. And so, and I had the fortune of standing in the back of these rooms, watching him speak, and people next to me, either side, either saying of like, "Oh, I love that. That was great." Or the person on the other shoulder going, "What an asshole." And I got to see both of them, which really helped me see like, there's no way you can please everyone. So we may as well make that decision quickly and build that audience faster by getting rid of the people who aren't the right fit. And so that's where it's like understanding that dominant trait of how you want to show up and leaning into it, obviously in a way that doesn't kill your ability to show up on these platforms, because you got to work within their rules. You're just borrowing the attention for now. But we realized that his humor, his joy for a good old-fashioned cocktail, all of these things made him stand out and appeal to his audience. Mm-hmm. So even moving forward, when COVID came about and everything was on shutdown and no one could go to events, no one could go out to a bar, things like that, we thought, well, what's a way to bring not only our audience in, but other people into our world? And we started hosting virtual happy hours. And so it wasn't a webinar. There wasn't a pitch. It was purely us saying, here's a Zoom link. We're going to get on for an hour. We're all going to have our favorite drink. Whether you're tuning in across the seas and you want to have your tea or your coffee, or you're sharing a cocktail with us now, doesn't matter. Show up. We're just going to tell bad jokes, hang out, have a good time, and then call it a night. And so that's what we did. We lent into him. We had tons of inappropriate jokes starting off all these calls, and we just shared a drink and spoke with our audience. Yeah. And that was a way of us being able to create this format of inviting our audience in and leaning into his personality. And so knowing how you show up and leaning into it is the first thing of developing your brand character. And we can get into that as well. But just knowing that dominant way that you show up and leaning into it, because the problem is most people are watching their competition or other forms of inspiration online, and they steer themselves to look like that person because, we have been taught model success. Right. And so it seems like a valid thing to do, but in doing so, you're taking away from how you are naturally, which is your advantage of attracting the kind of clientele that you want to work with. And so you can't be somebody else. Look at what they're doing. Maybe there's areas of inspiration, but that's where personal branding can be a lot of internal work. You need to know how you want to show up and who you are naturally.
I'm glad you shared the details of looking over the abrasive personality or being vocal. And initially you wanted to calm it down. Like most people, that's the natural reaction. And then you start to realize like, well, that's what makes you more unique. And we need to lean into that. Like people take notes here. Now I'll add something that I would say I would challenge that. I'll add a caveat, not challenge that, but caveat. I'll call it since you use the word asshole, we'll call it the asshole factor ratio, right? Because within our space, our marketing, internet, entrepreneurship space, social media, there is a segment of men, especially, that are like the alpha guys that are, want to kick everybody's ass and I'm super awesome and look at me flex and all. I get all that. I've seen it all. It's a human nature that's always been around. It's always going to be around. But here's where the factor is, right? For someone that's just getting into the scene, that's wanting to create their personal brand, and maybe you do have that personality, you're abrasive, or very vocal or domineering or whatever. That's fine. But I'll give you a tip. If that's you and you're listening to this or you're watching this and you think, I need to go all in and just be myself and screw everybody else, whatever they think, right? The asshole factor is that the bigger the asshole that you act like, you better have the results to back it up. Because a lot of people make this mistake where they come in trying to be the big jerk and tell people like it is, but then you go look and see what they've achieved and it's nothing. So now you're just an asshole with no results and nobody cares what you think. And now you just come across as a jerk. So if you want to be a big jerk and be very bold, like you better have some demonstrable results to back that up.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the what I said about before was character. And we actually, it was probably I would say maybe 5 years ago, that we were sitting in a mastermind and Ryan Dice was up on stage talking. And he shared this framework that screenwriters use to design characters called the character diamond. And that was one of the moments where I was like, this is an incredible tool. Like, I'm so glad we've heard about it. And it allowed us to gain more clarity on how we wanted to position not just him, but clients. And the character diamond, it's 4 components to what makes a character. And the first one is that primary trait. It's what's most dominant, most visible. It's what people admire about you. So obviously with my dad, his abrasive personality, the humor, but also his drive to go for more. His second book was called Go for Stupid. And that's what he always wanted to do, was just stretch the limits, push the bar up, and create amazing things. So that was part of the branding, because everyone saw over and over the stories we told of him closing down museums for private dinners or getting people to sing on stage with their favorite bands and all these other things.
Right.
That was very easy to lead with that dominant trait that people admired. But then on the character diamond, there's the secondary trait, the contrasting trait. And this is where you start to make yourself interesting. And so this usually is a direct contrast to that. For him, if you think of someone who's traveling around the world, speaking on stages, doing these amazing things and having this bold persona, it would be interesting and slightly a contrast to know that he was very introverted. And so anytime he got off stage, we'd run away and go get a drink somewhere to just kind of recharge and breathe and calm down. And so that was something that people didn't expect of him. They always thought he was go, 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 but he needed time alone to recharge. And so that was an interesting fact when our audience and people got to know him more, was that he's actually quite introverted. And so, for me, even, I am more of this, people come to me because I'm this analytical, nerdy marketing guy. And so when you think about this nerdy kind of, let's say, softer spoken person, my contrasting trait that people find interesting when they get to connect with me more is that I'm quite an adrenaline junkie. I've grown up racing motorcycles. I've raced them over 170 miles an hour. I've gone skydiving, just done all this stuff and love it. But that's a totally different energetic point than the engineering nerd. It creates that
dichotomy. It's a split. I like this. Yeah.
Right. It creates interest. And there's another gentleman which we can reference as well that went viral recently, and I think it's exactly for this reason. But then you come to the third component of the character diamond, which is your guiding star. And this is basically why you get up every morning, what's important to you, what drives all your decisions. With my dad, he wanted to push people. He wanted to help people see that there was more to them than they saw themselves. So his reason for writing these books and for getting on these stages as an introvert who didn't really want to was to help impact people to do more in the world and achieve their dreams. He got really lit up by that. And that's one of the things you'll hear from a lot of his clients or audience is the fact that he saw more in them than they did. and that they've been able to achieve more because of it. But what that guiding star does, and people talk about mission statements and all this, they make it fluffy, whatever. It doesn't really matter what your driving force is. The reason it's there is so that people can trust why you do what you do. It's like when there's a webinar pitch and you're saying the offer closes on Friday evening. The audience is going to go, well, why?
Yeah.
You could just say, because this takes a lot of work, it's exhausting, and I want to know that it's done and I can relax the rest of the weekend. And people are like, fair enough.
Valid. Yeah.
Yeah. So that guiding star is there so that people admire something about you. There's the contrasting trait that's interesting, creates that interest, that tension and character. That guiding star is there to help people find a way to trust why you do what you do and what they see on a regular basis. And then the last component, which to your point of that aggressive asshole alpha male character type, is the quirk or flaw. And that's where you take yourself off of the pedestal and reveal something that's human about you. And so for me, I am incredibly introverted. And so in this lane of personal branding, making content, getting on camera, doing these things is the most uncomfortable tasks that I have to do. And it's something that it gets in my own way of actually making content. I have to fight so much harder than other people to figure out how to get on camera, how to present myself and make content regularly so that I can help contribute to my own brand. And so that is something that people understand, and they could see the content, they could see what makes me good at what I do, but without that element of relatability, people don't see themselves in you. And it doesn't bring you back down to their level. So the reason why the alpha male character type that you were talking about is usually not very good is because they never show anything imperfect. They're constantly showing themselves as almost above you. And no one wants to connect with that. You can aspire to be at a higher level, but it's hard to approach someone and engage with someone if there isn't that relatable standpoint. And so, my dad being introverted and me being introverted, those were things. But for him, his quirk or flaw that got in the way a lot of the time was that he moved too quickly. He didn't think enough before taking an action, which is why we worked so well together, because I'm the opposite. Sometimes I take too long to take an action. And so, he put us into deals or into projects way too quick, and we were over our head on them. But it also still allowed us to do what we did. So knowing like what you stand out for is very important, but don't neglect those other corners of the character diamond that allow people to trust what you do, that add a layer of interest to your character, but also make you human. The worst thing you can do is try to be perfect, because then you do put yourself on this pedestal that's unattainable.
Anybody else just listen to that, I would say go rewind the last, 5-6 minutes of that and take notes and assess yourself in all those things. Because while you were explaining that, I was assessing myself, and turns out that I'm a pretty good mix of you and your dad, which is pretty cool, because there are a lot of things we have in common, where I'm generally a chill person. People that hang out with me and even at the events there, I'm pretty relaxed. I'm a calm person. I don't like to be all hyped up and crazy, but I am an adrenaline junkie, and I like to do combat stuff and race cars and jump off stuff. And you see, I skateboard. I'm 53 and I still ride.
Yeah.
And so I still have that. I've always been that, the stuntman personality. The purpose why is, I think for most people, I think that's what they're lacking, is the bigger purpose, is why they're not having the results they want in the other 3 areas. The results for most people, if you really want to lean into something that's going to work for you, the best way I've heard it from Ed Milet, he told us, is like you're best served to help someone that's an earlier version of yourself. Because we all have unique things that we experience in our life and situations and trauma. And how do we get through that? How do we create that business? How do we get over this and that? So we are always looking back to how could I have helped myself at like 18 or 25 or 30, and And that's what I do. It's like, hey, I always wanted to help people see more in themselves and believe in more in themselves and elevate what their potential is. And I've always had that capability. Even as a kid, I was always the one that was encouraging other people to do things and believing in them when they didn't believe in themselves. So that's my strong purpose. The quirky thing is exactly like you. I did not want to be on stage, never wanted to write books or put myself out there. I was very successful and I'm pretty good at hiding behind a logo instead of putting myself in front of the logo, which is kind of funny. I'm looking at this now, I'm in front of the logo now. And it used to be like the logo was the only thing that mattered. And I was good in the background, the operations. And, so yeah, it was very uncomfortable at hiring a speaking coach and joining Toastmasters and doing social media content and putting your face out there and actually experiencing that ridicule that we try to like
Yeah.
where fear of judgment is what keeps most of us from putting ourselves in front of cameras and doing things. But the fact is that they are going to judge you. And some of them will be hypercritical of what you're doing or doubt why you're doing what you do. And guys, I even had a guy in my last W-2 job was with Chevron. It was 2015, going back, right? It's been a while. There was another engineer that I worked with for 1 year on a project. We had a great relationship at work. He had no idea, like, any of the businesses and stuff that I built. He just knew me from that capacity of being another project manager at an oil company, right? We didn't really talk about outside of life, and when I decided to leave the industry and I started to make videos talking about entrepreneurship and results, he actually sent me a really nasty DM on Facebook, and he's like, "I have to unfriend you because you're becoming a grifter and you're gonna scam people, and you never achieved any of this kind of stuff that you're talking about." And I was like, "What?" And they blocks me, so I couldn't even reply back. So I went back, I found him on LinkedIn, and we were still connected, and I sent him a message it's like, "Brother, you don't even know anything I've achieved in my life. Like, you could have just Googled me. It's very public, everything I've ever done." And a couple days later, he sends me a reply and he's like, "I apologize. Like I reacted and the people that do what you're doing just really set me off." And maybe he got burned, maybe he bought a course and lost or whatever. But
Yeah.
guys, like this is like someone from far left field I would have never even expected a message from, much less a hate message and a block. So if you're worried about judgment, if you're worried about putting yourself out there and fearing criticism, guess what? You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. Even if you have the best of intentions, you're gonna get it. So you just got to get it in your mind and work with people like myself or Henry and we'll coach you through that. We can definitely get you through it, but don't think you're gonna be able to avoid it.
No. And also those people are way louder than your fans. The people who tend to actually consider working with you tend to be quieter. Like they're kind of lurking in the background and they're
That's true.
consuming what you do and they're actually thinking about it and weighing up that opportunity. Whereas the person who's commenting crap on your page, they just briefly saw it and they're like, no, I hate this, and they're just blasting it out there. There's absolutely no like thought going into that. They're just doing it. It's an emotional vent of their own because, like you said, there have been plenty of people burned by plenty of businesses online. That is the sad truth of it, is there's plenty of that. But yes, you are going to get plenty of negativity. Just know that there's usually multiples of positivity on the back end of that that isn't voicing itself. And the amount of people that I've had message me over the years who I've never seen a comment from, I've never seen any form of engagement on my social, they're just lurking there. And they like what they see. They benefit. I've had people message me saying that they started a business because of watching my content. And it's funny because I'm hardly known. I've been behind the scenes forever. And so even the little bits of things that I've put out there to try and make some content, provide some value, having people message me from high school who have started business because of seeing this
Very cool.
is incredible. And having them go through that shift of having known me in high school to then years later when I actually started going into this world of business and they actually resonated with it and liked it.
Awesome.
And now they're making change. That's incredible. But you don't see that. Years go by until I hear about it.
Years down the road, like you said, I mean, you're just putting your face out there now, but I've been in the internet publicly since 2001, right? It goes way back. And so it's cool to get messages from people that you impacted their lives 20 years ago and they started something and here it is now. And it's like, awesome, man. And you still remember those conversations because they were using
Yeah.
DMs or texts or maybe even a short phone call, get people going the right direction. And, I love that you talk about the percentages, like, right? Because if I were to put a number on it, because we're both data guys, I would say there's probably 5% of the people that watch your stuff and they can't stand you and they're never going to like you. 5%. Like it's a small number. And I would say there's probably 25% of people that tolerate what you're doing, but they're kind of curious, but they're not pro or con. They're kind of like, all right, I get it. Then you got the middle ones that are kind of leaning towards more support. Then you kind of got maybe the top 25% is like the ones that actually support what you do, and they're inspired or motivated by what you're doing, and they're watching what you do in a positive light, and then those are the ones that are considering to work with you, and so it's cool. But I think the problem is that, and the topic of personal branding and putting yourself out there, it's scary. It's like public speaking is the number one fear. It's like you talked about jumping out of planes. Like that's number two. Standing in a stage or putting yourself out there, which includes putting yourself on video, is number one. Public speaking is number one. And it's not the fear of talking. It's not the fear of pushing record. It's the fear of what other people are going to say or think. And so if I just gave you the data of 5% of those people are going to dislike you, I want you to understand what your potential upside is. Like, what is the dream that you would like to accomplish? What is the lifestyle that you would like to accomplish? The financial, the family, whatever, like whatever your goals are, really strongly visualize what that is. And maybe your potential that you don't see is bigger than it could be. Like it's probably much bigger than you can imagine, but you're going to put all of that on the shelf and not participate because you're worried about 5%. Instead of serving the 95% that actually tolerates you or approve of you, you're going to give all of your attention to that 5% and go, you know what? I'm going to give 5% of I'm going to give 95% of my attention to these 5% of these people that are never going to be at my funeral. They're never going to buy anything from me. They're never going to refer business to me. They're not going to show up for anything in my life, but I'm going to put my life on hold or pause because of them. Like that's the way you're really thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It is funny because people ask me about the skydiving stuff. I'm like, that was easy compared to the personal brand of like content and actually showing up. That's way more nerve wracking. I can jump out of a plane again tomorrow.
Right. And it's over sooner. So you're like, oh, I accomplished it. To check the box. Right.
Yeah. But it is hard to see. Like a while ago, I made a post and I said, just because they're not liking doesn't mean they're not watching. And people look at these metrics and they see that they've only got a couple likes, but then there's also hundreds of views and people on the back end are watching. And to your point, it's like if 5% of people are commenting and there's negativity, I always look at it as like, okay, here's, like you said, here's my dream life. Here's what I'm trying to do and the impact I'm trying to create. Are those 5%, that negativity, is that worth it to get to this?
No.
And it's always yes. Like taking those hits is nothing in comparison to that. It's a small price to pay.
Yeah.
And it's just important to know those numbers of like how many people are not commenting, how many people are not liking your content, but are actually benefiting from it and do enjoy what you have to say. It's only that small percentage of people who are going to say the negative things.
When you talk about like the 10 people that may like your post, or maybe, if you're lucky, you got 100 people watch something you put out there. People compare themselves too much to these big name influencers or people like yourself or even myself. And we're getting thousands of engagement and things like that, but they're comparing themselves like they're starting and they're going, well, I'm not getting 1,000, so I guess I'm not very good at this, right? Which is completely untrue. You may actually be exceptional at this. You just aren't well known at it yet, right?
Yeah.
We all started with 0 followers, every one of us, because platforms didn't really even exist till 2008. It's like we all started with 0. And I want you to also visualize if you're having this heartburn of not getting a lot of likes or views, like if you got 10 people that watched your post or your video or thing that you put out there, imagine visually what 10 people in a room looks like. That's a pretty decent conversation. If you're the center of attention of 10 people, like visually, that's like, okay, man, I actually, if I was tasked with speaking in front of 10 people, I would prepare for that and I would show up and make sure I delivered some value and they got something from that. And I didn't want to embarrass myself. So 10 people is a lot. 100 people is a lot. 1,000 people, 1,000 people is like a small sports stadium. Like that's how many
Yes.
people are consuming. Like you gotta realize everything that's watching and clicking and viewing, those are other humans. And thousands of people will listen to this podcast episode. And visually, like that's a giant arena of people that will
Yeah.
listen to this and share this. And so you have to start thinking about not likes, but those are humans.
Yeah. Also, when we look at how the social media world has changed, this and social media not being everything there is to personal brand, but being a solid resource to building your brand, the algorithms have changed in our favor. And, I'm actually still very early on in my own branding because of being behind the scenes for so long. And so I'm still myself testing it out and kind of tripping over myself in content. But beforehand, the way these platforms promoted things was someone would follow you and they'd show that follower your stuff.
Yeah.
And so the whole goal was get as many followers as possible so that each piece of content got served to them. But now, because these platforms have so much information about what you watch, what you like, what causes you to leave the platform, what things you save, what you share, it knows better than you do probably what you want to see. And so now we've moved away from that follower-based serving to interest-based recommendations. And so when you make a piece of content, the platform's transcribing that piece of content, understands what you're talking about, and serves it to the people who watch that kind of stuff. And so the views that you're getting, maybe they aren't as big as the people who years and years and years ago have acquired a massive following, but they're probably more relevant, those views. And so what's actually interesting to see now is there's a bunch of people who have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of subscribers and followers who aren't making as much money as other people, entrepreneurs with smaller audiences, because they're actually diluted in their audience. And the platform does test with a small portion of your followers. So if someone has spent the time acquiring a massive audience, but it's not super relevant to what they do, now they're putting out content and it's getting crickets. And so that's why you can have, and Gary V is fantastic, but that's why you can have Gary V put out a post that gets 100,000 views, but then you can have someone who's got 1,000 followers surpass Gary's video and viewership. Absolutely. Because it's a good piece of content that serves a large audience. And these platforms aren't looking at as much about how big your following is to serve to. They're looking at what kind of content are you doing and who is that best served for. So if you have a small market where you serve a niche clientele, don't judge what you're doing off of the small viewership. That might actually be far more profitable than trying to get a viral piece of content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think compounding this topic of your expertise over time, you're going to have a few that go off and get viral, and that's fine. But you know what? Here's the big secret for you. Those of you who have not had viral, I'll say viral is like 100,000 views. If you haven't had a post like that and you get one, you're going to realize you didn't get a lot of followers from that. I think I made one about the World Cup a few weeks back when it was kind of, the topic. And I think it got 100,000 views across the platforms. And I think I picked up 20 followers. Like, it's not even mentioning, so
Yeah.
it's substantially harder now to build followers, especially on Instagram. I think Instagram, I just lose followers. Like I think I had 25,000 at one point. They just trickle away. Kind of people are falling off the platform or closing down their accounts, or maybe I pissed them off. Who knows? But it used to be the upward trend where you'd log in every day and you'd pick up a few here and there, and it would just kind of just organically grow because that, like you said, used to be based on follower first. Now it's interest-based content, this algorithm, it's AI. And so in the earlier days of Instagram, I would say up until about 3 years ago, followers did matter. And it was all about running ads and building followers and getting in front of more eyeballs. Cause like you said, it served more people initially on the initial hit of the release. But nowadays, everything really copied TikTok's algorithm. So YouTube is this way, Instagram is this way. The only one that still has a follower count that is weighted heavy is Facebook, right? Because it's friends and followers and things like that. But Instagram, it's just create content and you'll see things that go viral. It's funny because sometimes I'll see someone who's getting like 1 million views on their post, and you go click on their profile and they only had like 500 followers, and it ain't going up. Like they're not even getting followers from that 1 million views on a viral piece of content. So it tells you, quit trying so hard to build followers because it really doesn't matter. Just build the content that you think that other people want to see, and that you're sharing something with them, and that entertains them or educates them, and keeps them moving. So
Yeah, the following thing is true because it's interest based, because the platforms know what we want.
Mhm.
It's not as necessary from the consumer standpoint to follow someone to see stuff you like, because you
right.
get served it on a more regular basis. Which is why I look at brand a lot as like a conversion mechanism rather than a massive lead gen source. Because like you said, you can have a video get 100,000 plus views and acquire 20 followers. But if you are still out there and you've got ads that are running, or you've got direct mail, or whatever your marketing mechanism is to generate traffic, if you have this layer of brand in between that traffic generation and the sale, you shorten the sales cycle or you increase your conversion rate, because naturally we are omnipresent in our research. We see something and we're like, okay, that's interesting to me. Let me go take a look. And naturally we go to a website and we go to social media, or
Yes.
we consume a podcast, and we do our research around this thing. And so if you don't build that layer of brand in between the first touch point and the sales touch point, then you could lose it. Or it might take more money in ads to continue to stay in front of someone to get them to buy. But if they can go from that first touch point of interest and then go to your podcast or to your website or to these other assets you have and binge some of that content and go, yeah, I like this person. I like what they do. They seem to know what they do. I'll try this out. And then they move forward to that sales portion. And so Google put out this study a while ago called the 7-11-4 rule. And, Google's got more data than probably anybody. What they found was that on average, it took about 7 hours of media consumption over 11 touch points and 4 formats or places to make a buying decision. And so that's, if you think about your one ad that touched them for maybe a minute, if that, it's going to be kind of tricky for that 1 minute, one touch point, one place to generate the majority of sales that we expect nowadays. It worked a longer time ago when there wasn't as much distrust built in the market. Now we're very skeptical. Like they talk about a trust recession because so many of us have bought crap or been burned by something. So if we can have this layer of brand where there are the podcasts, where there's the YouTube content, where there's the website, even in-person events, then these are all different touch points, different places and types of content that we can consume that allow us to build those 7 hours of content to generate the sale. And that's why this world of attribution in marketing is so tough, because you'll run ads, you'll look at a last click attribution where the last ad that someone clicked before purchasing, they neglect everything else before that point that generated enough trust that ad converted. So you can't just say that's what worked, kill everything else and run everything into this one ad, because there's so much more behind the scenes. And that's where brand is investing into a conversion mechanism that allows all of your marketing and your lead gen to operate even better.
No, I love that breakdown. And I really want to emphasize that 7-hour mark, because people listening to this may have just kind of heard it when one ear out the other. But guys, he just told you Google's data is telling you that they need 7 hours of contact with you, watching your videos or 7 1-hour podcast episodes or your YouTube. And if you're making all these 30-second little shorts or reels, you'd have to make a whole lot of those, and they would have to watch hundreds of them to make 7 hours worth. I don't know the math. I'm not going to do the public math, but that's a lot of content to get 7 hours on average for them to make a buying decision. And now the 11 points of contact, I've heard that in different industries. Coming from real estate with my wife's business, like they teach you 7 to 8 points of contact is kind of where they finally just know you're there. It's almost like they ignore you. They disregard you. They don't even, like, you're blind. And then like 7 to 8 touch points, which is phone calls, texts, ads, social media, all those count as a point. It takes 7 to 8 of those for a normal person just to raise awareness that you exist. You know,
Yeah.
it's mind blowing. Like, because there's so much noise that you're competing with, that you're just kind of like a little blip in the noise. And then you do it 8, 9, 10, 11 times. Like, this blip keeps showing up, and now you formed an entire human.
Yeah. It takes quite a few touch points before, like you said, we even recognize that something exists.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we think about those annoying jingles and commercials that we see on TV nonstop.
Yeah.
And we think, oh, how well does that really work? But the funny thing is, there's a company that does a lot of kind of home services called AD, and they have this little jingle that always pops up on our TV, and it goes AD, and it's just silly. But
this show is not sponsored by AD.
Yeah, but when something went wrong at my mom's house and she needed someone to come over and fix it, in her head, that little jingle stuck out, and she was like, oh, wait, I think they do this.
Yes.
And it took so many touch points of that commercial coming on TV every day, but it was ingrained into her brain. And so the next time she needed something, they were her first thought. And so when someone's in the market for something and you can stay in front of them and continue to stay top of mind, you help win that sale. So that is where these touch points matter a lot. And I know there's a lot of other marketing stats that will even argue hundreds of touch points and tons of different ads. But again, it just depends on the system that you're creating. It's why within the marketing space and online products and coaching programs and all that, it's why they're so heavy on doing challenges where they do 5 days of on-camera live interaction, because you can have an ad run people into 7 hours worth of content in 1 week and build that trust quickly to get to the sale. But if you're just relying on static ads, it could take hundreds of those to be able to generate that kind of trust and awareness. So I think now, if we can have that traffic source at the very top of what we do, bringing people into our ecosystem, things like the podcasting or YouTube long-form content and books, those are really heavy to digest pieces of content that do a lot more work for us towards those 7 hours and help us get to that sale much quicker. So that's why I think those are a few of the assets to focus on very heavily for building brand. And at the same time, we spoke about Google. YouTube is owned by Google.
Right.
Google promotes a lot of YouTube, but even now, when you look at reports of LLMs like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, all of these things, users are doing their search for solutions in those platforms. And YouTube is heavily cited amongst the search results and suggestions within these platforms. So it's kind of a double whammy where you get to make this content that someone can consume and get that face-to-face interaction and get work towards those 7 hours much more heavily than a 30-second short. But at the same time, if they're going out and searching on ChatGPT for a solution, your YouTube video could be the reason that they find you as well. So this layer of brand is really important to look at as a conversion mechanism rather than just trying to generate 1 million followers.
Yeah, I love it. I love this topic, and we can have a conversation all day on this. I want to ask one more question. A very
Sure.
common question I get from people that want to understand their content strategy, right?
Mhm.
So, one of the main content strategy questions we both no doubt receive is, well, how much, Henry, how much should I talk about my business or my life or, my social media? Like, is there like a ratio or should I even talk about my life or should it be all business? Like, what's your philosophy on that?
I think it's a balance based on the individual. So if someone, let's say take me for example, for me, it takes a lot of effort to get on camera. So I need to make my form of content as easy as possible. Some people are more natural and they can just be living their life and pull out a camera and they just riff and go for it. But I think the ratio is more like on kind of Gary Vee's jab hook
Right.
concept of make all this value content and then promote. And they have that kind of 6 posts to then 1 promotion post ratio. I think with branding, the first and foremost is driving the value. So you do need to make content that obviously displays what your business does for the client. If you don't have that, and you could be a great person, you could be showing content about what you get up to, what you enjoy, awesome, but no one's going to associate that with a solution that they're actively looking for.
Right.
So I look at a value first content strategy, but then it's a matter of, can we weave in personality? So for me, I'm a huge fan of coffee. I've got my whole espresso set up. I love making cappuccinos. So here and there, I'll make content where I'm talking while making a cappuccino. And like that's one way of weaving in personality and value.
Or motorcycle in the background or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been at the racetrack and in between sessions, I've recorded content, or I also love building and racing RC cars. So I can do the same thing there. So that's a way in which you can tie it in. But I think lead with value first. What kind of questions does your client have? Reverse engineer your offer and what you're doing for your client and make content around that. But then see if you can weave in the personality components. So there's another brand that I enjoy is Caleb Ralston. He's in the personal brand space. He was behind Gary Vee and Hermosi. He's done videos on his YouTube where he's sat with a glass of wine or he's sat on the back of his pickup truck out in the desert. And like those are components that make him him, or riding on his motorcycle. He's done content. So yeah, I haven't gone that far. People have told me like, oh, you should have a mic in your helmet while you're going around the racetrack.
The windshield.
Yeah, like, do you know how much thought is required just to make sure you hit that corner correctly? I'm not doing content at the same time. But yeah, I think look at the value first in terms of how much content, how regularly. Do as much as you can to maintain a high quality without burning out.
There you go.
It's just dependent on you. Some people naturally have a higher energy reserve than folks like us do. And so that is, if you can only do 1 piece of content a week, do that. Also, it's about system. So some people are like, I want to do YouTube, but I also want to do TikTok and I also want to do Instagram, and they treat it all as very individual things. For me, I usually look at YouTube Longform first and then build a system around where you've got nuggets within that piece of Longform content so that you record 1 video that goes out on YouTube each week, but then you can pull 3 shorts from it. And then in between those pieces of value nuggets going out on your short forms, show yourself traveling or working on your hobbies or doing those other things so that you're sandwiching it on value and making sure you're relevant to your client, but then highlighting those other character components we were talking about. And then it's not such a big endeavor to be able to create content and build this brand. I would say now focus on like a YouTube long form strategy where you can pull 3 shorts out of it every single week and then insert your personality in between and be social on these social platforms.
Be yourself. It's a whole lot easier to be yourself than it is like creating a persona or character. It's be yourself. If you're interested in quirky things, like show those things. If you're learning something new, show those things. If you're an expert at something, show those things. Like people are looking for avenues to be relatable, oh, we have that in common. It's a human
Exactly.
nature. So give them some opportunities to do that. It's been a great conversation, man. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So if people want to learn more about you or maybe even work with you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can head to my website, henrysims.com. You can even book a brand audit call there, and we can just chat about your business and what you're trying to do with your own brand. Or you can find me, Henry D. Sims, on any of the social media platforms.
Awesome, guys. Well, if you got something from this, and I know if you're paying attention, you probably heard a lot of good things in this episode. Share this with your friends, your family, people that need to know this, people that are scared to push record on that microphone, and they should be doing it to create some more profit in their business. And let's be real, like make your life happier and get past some of the anxiety and stress that you're just avoiding because you're worried about that 5% of the critics in your life. So great episode. We will see you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.
I appreciate you for listening to the show. Your support has helped this show become globally ranked in the top 1% of all podcasts. I sincerely thank you for that. How would you like to work with me to help your business start, scale, or exit? Whether you're just getting started or you've built multi-million-dollar companies, we've got different offerings and activities that we've created to help you enhance your business, your life, and your bottom line. We have one-on-one coaching, mastermind groups, and live events. If you'd like to check those out, visit my website at 365driven.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.